Welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in today because we're about to embark on a really profound exploration into the sheer rarity of Earth's most endangered species. Now, we hear about extinction all the time, right? But today, we're flipping the script. We are zooming in on the actual survivors, the animals that are literally hanging on by a thread. And I promise you, this isn't just some random top 10 list. It's an incredible story of fragility, of surprising resilience, and honestly, the absolutely bizarre lengths we have to go to just to keep these species alive.
Okay, let's dive into this. 8 million. That is the estimated number of animal species sharing this amazing planet with us. It's a staggering, almost incomprehensible scale of biodiversity, isn't it? Just this bustling, thriving globe of life. But that massive number actually hides a much, much more precarious reality. Because out of those 8 million, we've only actually documented about 1.2 million species. And when we look closely at that specific documented slice, well, we find something pretty terrifying. While we have over 1 million species officially on the books, our focus today is on a literal handful of survivors. We're talking about entire global populations that have dwindled down to the hundreds, the dozens, and in some absolutely heartbreaking cases, mere single digits. So to truly understand how a species gets pushed to that ultimate brink, we aren't just going to do a simple countdown. Instead, we've organized this explainer thematically. First up, we'll look at collateral damage, then vanishing habitats. From there, we'll explore the invasive threat, followed by some miraculous rediscoveries before wrapping up with the fight for survival. All right, let's start with our first theme, collateral damage or getting caught in the crossfire. This happens when human actions meant for entirely different purposes inadvertently wipe out a vulnerable animal. And man, there is no clearer or honestly sadder example of this than the Vaquita. This is the world's smallest cetacean. It's a tiny little porpoise reaching just 150 centimeters, and it lives exclusively in the shallow waters of the Gulf of California. Now prepare yourself for this drop. In 1997, there were about 600 vaquitas. By 2007, just 150. By 2018, down to 19. And today, there are likely less than 10 left alive on the entire planet. Why? Well, they aren't actually being hunted. They're mammals, so they need air to breathe, and they are tragically drowning as bycatch in fishermen's nets. Despite various fishing bans, the complex socioeconomic realities in the area mean this beautiful little species will very likely be gone in a matter of years, simply as collateral damage. Another unbelievable example of being caught in the crossfire is the devil's hole pupfish. This unique, electric blue fish lives in exactly one place on Earth, a geothermal pool inside a limestone cavern right in the middle of the Nevada desert, where the water stays a constant 33 degrees Celsius. And it gets crazier. They only live in the top 24 meters of this cavern, completely relying on one specific rock shelf to feed and reproduce. They were doing just fine for ages until the 1960s and 70s. That's when nearby agricultural irrigation started drawing down the local water level. As the water dropped, their vital little shelf was exposed to the air, pushing the entire species right to the brink of oblivion. It sparked massive tension in the area. I mean, people literally drove around with "Kill the pupfish" or "Save the pupfish" bumper stickers. Ultimately, it took a full-blown Supreme Court battle to finally protect the cavern as a national monument. Moving on to our next threat category, vanishing habitats, or being pushed to the edges.
This threat is all about the direct destruction of the spaces these animals call home, usually for human convenience, agriculture, or urban expansion. And it creates a terrifyingly fragile picture for the Hainan gibbon. This is a small ape found only on Hainan Island in Vietnam. Over the past century, a staggering 95% of gibbon habitat in the region was completely wiped out, mostly cleared for illegal pulp paper plantations. Because of this massive deforestation, the most recent count found a total of just 22 Hainan gibbons left in the wild. That's it, 22. And they are crammed into just one family of 11, another family of 7, and 4 lone individuals. Just think about that. When your entire species is confined to this one tiny, isolated group, a single extreme weather event or an illness could wipe the entire species off the face of the earth overnight. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer, frustrating absurdity of how habitat loss can actually happen. Let's look at the timeline of the Palos Verdes blue. It's a tiny, super rare butterfly native to exactly one site in Los Angeles County. It was discovered in 1977 and officially protected under the U.S. Endangered Species Act in 1980. Great news, right? Well, in 1982, the city of Rancho Palos Verdes decided they really wanted a new baseball field, and they just bulldozed the butterfly's only known habitat. When the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service sued the city in 1987, get this, the city actually won. Why? Because of a massive, glaring loophole. At the time, the Endangered Species Act only protected species against the actions of individuals, not cities or corporations. The law was amended the very next year, but obviously the damage was already done. Which brings us to our third major issue, the invasive threat, or unnatural enemies. So, what happens when we humans introduce non-native species into completely isolated ecosystems? Well, we see a deadly, repetitive pattern of island ecosystems completely collapsing. You see, islands have unique endemic species that evolved completely without natural predators. So when humans introduce them, it's just utter devastation. Over in Madagascar, introduced fish ended up eating all the babies of the Madagascar pochard, which is a rare diving duck. In the Caribbean, mongooses were brought in and they absolutely decimated the native reptiles. The St. Lucia racer, which is one of the rarest snakes in the entire world, was nearly wiped out because the mongooses ate both their prey and the snakes themselves. And the exact same thing happened to the Jamaican iguana. The mongooses aggressively fed on their young, driving the whole population right off a cliff. So, by the mid-20th century, species like the Palos Verdes blue, the Madagascar pochard, the St. Lucia racer, and the Jamaican iguana were all officially presumed extinct, lost to history, gone forever. Or so we thought.
Because nature has this completely unbelievable capacity for resilience. Let's look at the totally miraculous return of that Jamaican iguana. Assumed entirely extinct back in 1948, decades went by without a single confirmed sighting. Then, one day in 1990, a man named Edwin Duffus was just out hunting when his dog cornered something inside a hollow log. It was a Jamaican iguana. It was pretty badly injured, but it was alive. From that one incredible, random discovery, scientists managed to track down 2 tiny surviving populations. Today, thanks to extensive captive breeding, around 50 of them exist out there. Though it's a tough world, they're still actively threatened by illegal logging for the local charcoal industry. And speaking of miraculous survival against all odds, consider this absolutely wild fact about the greater bamboo lemur. This is a species native to Madagascar that was also thought to be completely extinct until it was suddenly rediscovered in 1986. They feed almost entirely on bamboo shoots. But here is the crazy kicker. If a human ate the exact same quantity of bamboo shoots as the greater bamboo lemur, we would die. Straight up. These shoots contain extremely high quantities of naturally occurring cyanide. To this very day, scientists still do not fully understand how this little lemur manages to consume lethal amounts of cyanide on a daily basis and just survive. It's fascinating. Sometimes, though, ensuring that survival requires us to get incredibly creative. Let's look at the bizarre steps taken to save the Madagascar pochard, which holds a title for the rarest waterfowl in the world. After completely vanishing in the 1960s, a tiny little group of about 25 ducks was shockingly found in 2006. They were barely surviving in a freezing crater lake high up on a mountain, which is a totally unsuitable environment for them. Conservationists had to act fast. They collected eggs for a captive breeding program in 2009. But the most brilliant part of this whole story happened in 2018, during their release into a brand new, better habitat called Lake Sofia. To protect the ducks while they adapted to the wild, conservationists actually flew in salmon farming cages all the way from Scotland, inverted them to float above the water, and used them as protective floating aviaries. I mean, talk about a clever solution. Which leads us to our final chapter, the fight for survival hanging by a thread. So, the crucial point is, saving these animals isn't just about finding them again. It's a massive, ongoing, and sometimes truly desperate fight just to keep them from slipping away a second time. And this fight often creates a really stark contrast between captive stability and wild peril. This is brilliantly illustrated by the orange-bellied parrot. This beautiful, small parrot is one of only 3 migratory parrot species in the entire world, flying back and forth between Tasmania and the Australian mainland. But because of severe habitat degradation, their wild numbers go through extreme boom and bust cycles. In 2017, there were literally only 14 left in the wild. By 2019, that number boomed to over 100, but then by 2022, it completely crashed back down to 51. Today, we have over 300 of these birds sitting safely in aviculture breeding programs, but less than 50 are actually out there surviving in the wild. And perhaps the darkest irony in this whole fight for survival belongs to the Chinese giant salamander. Now, these guys are literal living fossils. They're massive aquatic amphibians that can reach up to 1.8 meters in length and weigh 50 kilograms. But they are considered a high-end delicacy in China, and this has led to a really tragic paradox. Right now, there are literally millions of these salamanders sitting in commercial farming facilities. However, these extremely crowded farms act as super incubators for disease, specifically the deadly hemorrhaging ranavirus. So when farmed salamanders are released or manage to escape back into the rivers, they spread this terrible virus straight to the vulnerable wild populations. Meaning, despite millions of them existing in captivity, there are estimated to be less than 50,000 left in the wild, and that number is just steadily declining.
Throughout all of this, we've seen how easily human expansion, invasive species, and sometimes sheer carelessness can just erase millions of years of evolution in a matter of decades. But we've also seen how a single discovery in a hollow log or a repurposed salmon cage floating on a lake can offer a real glimmer of hope, which leaves us with this final, vital question to ponder. With life literally hanging by a thread, what is our ultimate responsibility to protect the remaining fractions of our shared ecosystems? Because the truth is, once these incredibly fragile survivors are gone, we can never bring them back. Think about that and keep exploring. I'll see you in the next